With so many options, why choose Arizona State University?
For me, the only online option was ASU because of the quality. Their faculty was really involved with their students and care about your personal journey. The dedication to my personal development from my professors, that's been extremely valuable to me.
Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online. That's a degree better. Explore more than 300 undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs at asuonline.asu.edu.
Owning a boat comes with a number of perks, like being able to say ahoy or land ho and not feel weird about it. So here's another perk. Geico's boat insurance offers access to the largest towing fleet on the water. And with specialist support from agents that are as passionate about boating as you are, there's so much value that you'll want to say, shiver me timbers, and not feel weird about that either. Get more with Geico.
This is Wheelbearings. I'm Dan Roth.
And I'm Sam Abuel-Samad.
And it's a totally remote show. I am driving and you are in the south.
I am in the deep south, and not the deepest south, but pretty far down. I'm in Atlanta today.
Yeah, and what are you there for?
I am here for the Connect ATL Summit, which is happening tomorrow, and I'm going to be on a panel talking about infrastructure needs for autonomous and connected vehicles and EVs. So should be pretty interesting. I'll be on the panel with someone from AT&T, Georgia DOT, and I can't remember who else. But there's one other person on the panel with us, and should be a pretty interesting discussion. And I'll put up a link to the site in the notes, if anybody wants to follow up on that later on. But where are you right now, Dan?
I'm on Route 95 in I think I'm in Wareham, Massachusetts. So I'm driving a Mitsubishi Outlander PHEV because Mitsubishi came to our local auto writers group with the Outlander PHEV, which is new for this year, and
it's new to America anyway.
Yeah, that's what basically their spiel was like. It's a new model based on some very old hardware. And they had the Eclipse Cross as well, which I got to sort of crawl around a little bit. So they sent me home with the Outlander PHEV, which, I haven't driven it a ton. I've driven other Outlanders, and they always drive okay. And this one's no different. It drives pretty well. The extra weight of the battery actually makes it, feel a little bit more sort of buttoned down in a way. It's well behaved, but the PHEV stuff itself is pretty interesting. I think it's the only vehicle in its class that can do DC fast charging, which is a plus if you have, that capability near you. It turns the plug-in aspect of it into sort of more of an analog with filling up with fuel. So that was.
Except the battery's not that big, so it doesn't really seem to make sense why you would bother with the DC fast charging capability.
Yeah, that is sort of my question overall is who the Outlander PHEV is for. Because a lot of the hybrids and electric vehicles, they're like a status thing, right? They're usually premium brands. And a buyer for an Outlander is like, that's a high value buyer. Right, they're buying on monthly payment probably, and on features, or just like, what can I get financed for? It's a very utilitarian end of the market. So EVs and plug-ins and hybrids in this end of the market tend to struggle a bit. And we've seen other automakers try it. I'm not knocking Mitsubishi, on its own. I'm questioning how well it's going to do, just because I think that the hybrid buyer, there'll be some, but I don't think overall they're looking at this end of the market. They expect to pay more, and they want to buy the hybrid as a not a status thing, but in some ways, yeah. It's a premium car. I don't know. Maybe you have a better read on who might actually buy one.
Well, I think the people that would be interested in something like the Outlander hybrid are the customers who perhaps want to be able to drive electrically. They're interested in having an EV, but they also they want the extra utility and space that you can get in a mid-size crossover. So maybe they've got a little bigger family, or older kids, where perhaps something like the Leaf might not be big enough, might not have enough room, and if they want to have the ability to take road trips and things like that, the kinds of things that a lot of families buy a mid-size crossover for. But they also want that green capability. So, you've got the ability to drive electrically for your local commuting without using any gas. And then when you want to go somewhere, you don't have to, worry about, trying to rent a vehicle for the weekend for a road trip. Or to take a family vacation. You just keep driving it the way you would any other vehicle and still get decent fuel economy. Kind of like the same type of customer I would see for something like the Chrysler Pacifica hybrid. Yeah,
well, and in that case, I think the Outlander PHEV is a good choice, or a good option anyway.
Yeah, I mean, you get 22 miles of electric range. So you plug it in at night when you get home, unplug it in the morning. You can shuttle the kids around to school or to, their various events. And, you might be able to do, get 20, if all of your normal daily driving around town is less than 20 miles, which for a lot of people it is, then you could go months without using any gas. And then, when the time comes, you just keep on driving, and it operates like a regular hybrid at that point.
Yeah. And that's the thing, that they used as a selling point, and because I think the average commute is it like 12 miles or something overall, which means that some people's commutes are like mine, where they're 90 miles a day. But like if your commute is truly like 12 miles, you got plenty of capacity.
75% of people drive less than 30 miles a day, or 35 miles a day. So, as plug-in hybrids go, the Outlander is kind of on the low end of the range for most plug-in hybrids. Most of them are closer to 30 to 35 miles, except for a few of the premium Germans, like the BMWs, which are, and the Volvos, which are in the 12 to 15 mile range. But, a lot of them, like the Hyundais and Kias and the Prius Prime, are in the 27, 28 mile range. The Volt is up, over 40 miles. So, it all depends on what your needs are. This gives you another option in that type of vehicle that is, relatively affordable. It's got the utility that you would expect of a crossover, and it's going to be efficient. Yeah. No,
I mean that sort of it is on the low end of the sort of range, I suppose, for electric only, but it's also on the low end of the price, and they still get you get a tax break with it or a rebate, I forget which, but you get a break on the price because of the incentives. So it brings it down into the 20s. So even there, like a 3-row crossover in the 20s, high 20s, low 30s, you're doing okay. That's not terrible to begin with. And then the efficiency thing, if that's truly, one of the selling points for you, it has a compelling argument to make. So, yes, it's old hardware, but it drives okay, and it's they've updated some of the things that I like the least about the older one. So they're trying, and they did make it a point to say, like, Mitsubishi is part of the Renault Mitsubishi or Renault Nissan alliance, so they're the largest automaker in the world overall, I guess, all of them together. That was what they said anyway.
Yeah, I mean it's kind of a horse race between VW Group, the Renault Nissan Mitsubishi Alliance, and Toyota. They kind of go back and forth. They're all three of them are in the roughly 10 million vehicles a year range for the last couple of years. So, they're one of the biggest, and the advantage to that is that for years, before Renault Nissan took a controlling interest in Mitsubishi about a year and a half ago. Mitsubishi was really struggling especially in the U.S. market. They always had pretty small sales, and it was kind of an inside joke among the automotive media. Why do they keep sticking around in the U.S. market with so few sales? It can't really be worth it for them. But now, with the being part of the alliance, they're going to have new products that are sharing hardware and sharing platforms with Renault and Nissan. So the brand has a future now. It's not going away. So now you can think about buying an Outlander, and you can have reasonable confidence that the brand is going to be around in the U.S. for the foreseeable future, and you're going to get support and parts and everything. Unlike other brands that have gone away like Suzuki and Daewoo and Daihatsu, over the years. Mitsubishi's going to be sticking around for at least for the medium term.
Well, I mean, and who doesn't love a good underdog, right? Like they have a charm about them, right? They're trying. They're putting out cars. They're putting out new models. They honestly, from a total inside baseball like auto writer perspective, they take good care of us. We get a lot of their cars. They send us one of everything they make, I think. Right, at least, I get in their cars on a regular basis, and there's something to be said for that. You make the most of what you got, so they at least send us the cars to try out, and they get pressed that way. So good for them. It's funny the pitch that they sort of started off with for the Outlander PHEV was like, we put a little bit of the iMEV or iMEV or however you say it. We took some of what we learned from that because that was an early production EV, and they combined it with their sports experience with the Lancer Evo. And I was like, okay, because I guess they took one of these to Baja a while ago, or a prototype or something. It's as far as like the 3-row plug-in crossover hybrid thing, you're generally looking at hybrid hardware. I mean, at a high-end hardware like the Volvo, like the BMW X5, to get a lot of sort of the feature set that you get here. Certainly, you get other things with those brands as well. They're more luxurious. They're bigger. They
handle better. So it's funny. I drove the Outlander plug-in a couple of months ago, and the Evo was definitely not something that came to mind when I drove it. I mean,
although I think it's a version of the GS platform.
Compared to other other Mitsubishis that I'd driven in recent years, it was a vast improvement. But it certainly did not call to mind Evo in any way, shape, or form, other than the 3-diamond logo.
You didn't take it to Baja. See?
That's true.
I'm going to have to take... You know what? I think I'm just going to go into the median here and drive home on the median. It's been a very hybrid-heavy a couple of weeks, because last week I had I just turned it in, a Hyundai Ioniq, and again, that's a very good hybrid. It makes a compelling compelling argument for itself, and we've talked about it before. The sort of high point for me with the Ioniq this time around, and I sent a picture to Alex Nunez. I put 700 pounds of gravel in it.
So you used it the way people should be using a truck.
Yeah, and then I went back. Well, it's a hatchback, and it's perfect.
Oh, I know.
I went back, and I got 16 80-pound bags of concrete mix. And so I didn't do them all at once because I'm standing there in the store going, 16 times 80. No, that's like 1,300 pounds. That's way too much to put in the car all at once. So I made 2 trips. So each trip was about 640 pounds apiece. And it's a 4-mile trip home. It was no big deal. I was careful, but that was amusing to me. Like, I'm going to use a hybrid like a pickup. What are you driving?
So I went through, since the last time we recorded, I went through a couple of different utility vehicles that are sort of on the opposite ends of the spectrum when it comes to, these high-riding utility vehicles. So I started off, when we last recorded, I had just gotten into the new Jeep Wrangler. The 2.0 turbo, which is new for the 2018. So this is the new, JL Wrangler, which is completely redesigned from the previous generation, which had been around for a few years. Still obviously looks totally like a Jeep. You take a World War II Jeep, from 1942, and you park it next to this thing, and you clearly see the lineage. You see the DNA there. It's 7-slot grille, the round headlights, the flat plain windshield. It's all there. This one was the 4-door, the Unlimited, and it was in Sahara trim. And like I said, it had the new 2-liter turbo, which is, it's part of the same engine family that you'll find under the hood of the Alfa Romeo Giulia and Stelvio as their base engine, at least here in North America, and also in transverse form in the 2019 Cherokee that I drove the week before. In the case of the Wrangler, it's also equipped with FCA's, Fiat Chrysler's 48-volt mild hybrid system, which they badge as eTorque. And it's essentially, it's the same basic architecture that you'll find in the Ram eTorques that I drove a couple weeks ago. But in the case of the the Wrangler, couple of things that are slightly different. The battery in the Rams, the 48-volt lithium-ion battery is mounted up against the rear bulkhead of the cab behind the rear seat. So it's an air-cooled battery. Because the Wrangler, you can take the top and the doors and everything else off of this thing and almost completely dismantle it with just a few bolts. And because it's also capable of fording through 30 inches of water, they used a sealed battery pack, which is liquid cooled, in order to keep the uncontrolled water out of the thing. So back in June at FCA's annual What's New event at their proving grounds, I had a chance to drive the 2018 Wrangler on the off-road course out there, which is, that's a pretty serious off-road course, driving over. It's not the Rubicon Trail, but, we drove through about 18 inches of water and muck and, over all kinds of logs and up some pretty steep hills. And that was in the Rubicon version, which has I can't remember now. It's Rock Track.
Is that right?
It was the Pentastar, but they have a couple of different 4-wheel drive systems. So all Wranglers get 4-wheel drive as standard equipment, but They have three different variations. They have, there's an automatic 4-wheel drive system, that sends power to the front wheels without you having to shift it. Then there's 2 part-time 4-wheel drive systems that have 4-wheel low range and everything. There's the Command Track, and then there's the Rock Track, I think, is the version that's on the Rubicon. And that one, on the Rubicon, you get the 4-wheel drive low range is like a 4.1 to 1 low range on top of a 4.5 to 1 final drive ratio. And so, like in fourth gear and 4-wheel drive low, with the locked center, transfer case, at 4th gear, like 11 miles an hour, it's turning over 4,000 RPM. Which is it's we're talking serious rock crawling capability.
That's a lot of multiplication there.
I think the total ratio with in first gear with all the other stuff comes out to something like 84 to 1. reduction ratio, which is, I mean, it's insane. But, if you're going to be going out to Moab or somewhere, like, the kind of thing that my neighbor does with his 90s era Wrangler, then that's perfect for you. For most people that are, not going to be doing that sort of thing, the command track system that was on the one I drove is a little more reasonable. It's still a part-time shift on the fly system, but the four-wheel drive low range is not quite as extreme. And with the 2-liter turbo, it's actually surprisingly fuel efficient. I averaged 23 miles per gallon over the week, which compared to the last Wrangler I drove about a year and a half ago with the Pentastar in it, that one got about 15 or 16, I think.
Yeah,
so
that's surprisingly good for a Wrangler Unlimited because they're big, they're heavy, and they're just not that fuel efficient. And in the 20s is good. Without the Jeep having sacrificed any capability with this thing, it's as capable as it's ever been in its off-road chops. They've also made it much more civilized on-road. So the previous Wrangler, on certain roads, especially my favorite stretch of I-94, where the previous Wrangler, got decidedly bouncy. This one is much better controlled. It's got a much smoother ride. I wouldn't call it plush by any means, but it's much more comfortable to drive. And this time around, one of the things they do with the Wranglers, because you can take off the doors, you can fold down the windshield, you can take the roof apart. It comes with a little toolkit in there with the drivers you need to take all that stuff off. And so, I just wanted to try it out and see what the experience was like driving a Jeep without doors on it, because I'd never done it before. It's so good. Well, the Unlimited looks stupid without its doors. It's very ungainly, but the experience itself is enjoyable.
Yeah. So, I only took off the front doors. But it's only 3 bolts for each door, and then unplug the wiring harness for the windows and mirrors. And it's very simple to take off. The doors are surprisingly lightweight; they're aluminum. I just put them in the garage and then went for a drive. And I drive my Miata with the top down all the time, and so I'm used to driving with some wind in what's left of my hair. Man, I was not prepared for the experience in the Wrangler, because this is not the most aerodynamic vehicle in the world, and so with the doors off, the air is just rushing around all over the place. It was by far the windiest I've ever experienced in a moving vehicle. Yeah, and
also go ahead.
It's a little weird driving, 45 miles an hour with no door beside you, being completely exposed, nothing but a seatbelt to hold you in place, and no mirrors either.
Right. Well, you can relocate the mirrors, right? There's a kit to relocate the mirrors.
And you can get aftermarket ones that bolt onto the windshield frame. Yeah,
but so to me, because I'll see people without their doors on their Wranglers driving on the highway, no doors, no top, whatever, and I'm just like, you're doing it wrong. Like the no doors thing, that's, to me, that's a strictly in town or non-highway.
Or when you're driving, in the sand dunes and things like that. Yeah,
and so the best thing is you get that left foot, you sort of just prop it up on the curve of the door opening and just it's the Jeep no doors posture, and the wind circulating is good until it gets to be too much, and
it gets to be too much pretty quickly.
Yeah, it does, and I wonder too if having all the doors off changes the airflow, so it's actually less intense. There's less velocity through that one opening, but I'll leave that up to somebody else to figure out.
Yeah. The one I was driving was the hardtop, and they actually have a new option this year, which is a retracting roof.
Power
retracting roof.
retracts.
Yeah, so it's it's a fabric roof that folds back, like you find in a lot of older vehicles. Kind of like an old Citroen 2CV, or something like that, except it's power operated, and it basically goes all the way back. So you're completely the roof is completely exposed to the sky. So with that, if you have the hardtop, instead of taking the entire roof off, you can just open that up, take the doors off, and you have, I think, pretty much nearly the same experience you have, in a completely open Wrangler. And it's going to be a lot less hassle. There's a lot fewer parts to stash away. And, if it does start to rain, you can at least close the roof and not get completely drenched.
Yeah, that was the thing that I noticed about the JL is I didn't really have any complaints about the JK in terms of it being a Jeep and being appropriately, primitive. The JL it keeps all of the stuff that's good about the Jeep experience. It keeps it authentic in that sense. But it's really, really thoughtfully done. Like, every aspect of that car has been fussed over. And you can tell.
No, absolutely. There's a lot of, they did a nice job updating the interior. It doesn't, it doesn't look like a Range Rover, but it looks a lot more modern. You've got a 7-inch Uconnect screen in there with support for Android Auto and CarPlay. Like the Ram, it's also got USB Type-C ports. If you've got a modern Android phone that has support for faster charging through those, which is very handy. The only real downside of this thing is the price. It starts the basic 2-door Sport is not too unreasonable. Starts at about $28,000.
And you say this is a downside, but really this is the upside of the Wrangler if you're FCA.
Well, that's true. Yes, I mean the Wrangler and the Ram are the cash cows that drive FCA. That's where all the profit comes from. As a customer, it can be a downside, but starting at $28,000 for a 2-door soft top Wrangler is not too bad. But the one that I was driving, which was a 4-door hardtop unlimited Sahara trim, was over $49,000.
Yeah, and it has all the words: unlimited, hardtop, Sahara, like that.
Yeah. And just for fun, I went and priced out the 4-door Rubicon, which that's the ultimate off-road version. And if you start, if you load up all the possible options on there, you can get it up over $61,000.
Yeah, I'm surprised it doesn't go over 70. I mean, Jeeps are they're like Barbie dolls for grown men, right? They're never stock. They're always they're just like this self-expression machine, and it's fine.
Oh yeah, I mean, and there's a huge range of aftermarket stuff that you can put on these things, and like I said, you can take apart most of it yourself as well, with nothing but the tools that come in the little pouch that's in the center console. You can take off the doors, you can take off the roof, you can fold the windshield down. I don't think you can take the windshield off completely, but you can fold it down. You can take off the bumpers. It goes crazy.
No, I like the way they've actually redesigned the windshield frame, because that was one of the big issues, was are they still going to be able to have that fold-down windshield? And so what they did was very clever. Was, yes, you can fold down the windshield, but there's still a frame that's present. It's not the whole frame that folds down any longer.
Right.
And I guess you could bemoan that as somewhat of a loss of purity, but when you roll the thing on your head, you're going to be happy it's there.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And with the 4-door, if you got a family, there's plenty of room in there, for the kids in the back seat.
I mean, Yeah, everybody's got to be pretty bought into that. This is what we were explaining to Casey, right? Was like, yeah, the Wrangler Unlimited, like, it'll hold your family. You got to make sure your family's on board with that, though.
Yeah. I think
it is a lifestyle.
Yeah, I think, and I think for a lot of people, the novelty will wear off pretty quickly.
Yeah, it wore
off on Casey within a few days.
Right. That, like, with me, it's the same thing. It's like, yeah, it's neat, it's a thing, but like if you've got to use it like a regular car, like you're gonna get sick of it. Or maybe you won't, but I think you do have to understand, like, it's loud, it's bouncy, even now, and then, like, the nature of that vehicle is just what it is, and it's fine until you just want something that's normal, because you've got that Wrangler-ness, and it's big, it's thirsty, even with the e-torque engine, like, something that size as just a family SUV, you can get something that does much better. Fuel economy wise, it's got a lot of expensive spinny hardware that you're going to have to maintain if you're going to keep it for the long term. The payments, because it's expensive, are hefty, and it's not as space efficient inside as a crossover or an SUV. But that's why Jeep offers other stuff. That's why you have a Cherokee and a Grand Cherokee and the Compass. You've got other options that are much more sensible. Yeah. So if you want to have no sense at all, yes, get the Wrangler. I mean, I like it. I've always loved the Wrangler. My favorite Wrangler is the two-door, just because it feels so much more nimble and maneuverable. But there's no shame in the Unlimited, and if you like that extra bit of utility, like, it's fine. But yeah, you got to know what you're getting yourself into. Right. And then, once I swapped out the Wrangler, I exchanged that for another utility vehicle that's not quite as extreme. It's the new Nissan Kicks, which is Nissan's new entry-level crossover. I love that thing. It looks fantastic. They had one tonight at the event. One of the other auto writers was driving one, and it was blue with a white roof, and it looks great. Yeah, the one I had was the gunmetal silver with the orange roof, the copper colored roof, and they've got three different two-tone combinations. They've got the silver with the copper roof. There's one that the main body is the copper, and it has a black roof, and then the blue with the white roof. And I personally like the blue with the white roof the best. This is their entry-level crossover that doesn't really replace the Juke in the lineup. The Juke is no longer being imported into the U.S. There's supposed to be a new Juke coming next year, and it's not really. This isn't really a direct replacement for the Juke. The Juke is more of a niche vehicle. It's a little sportier, certainly a little more outlandish looking, to put it mildly. This is the Kicks is a more mainstream vehicle, and it's it's clear, when you get in it, that it was really designed to a price point. It's designed to be an affordable crossover utility option. So it's practical. It's a lot more practical than the Juke. The Juke is really tight in the back seat. Adults are not going to want to sit in the back of a Juke for very long. The Kicks, has a much more reasonably sized back seat, reasonable sized cargo area, but it's certainly not a premium vehicle. If you want, it's got some decent amenities, but if you want something a little higher trim that's still fairly small, you're probably going to want to step up to the Rogue Sport. But with the Juke, you've got a 1.6 liter 4-cylinder and a CVT as the only powertrain option. Front wheel drive only. There's no all wheel drive version of the Kicks available in the U.S. market right now. Is that a turbo engine, or is that just? No, it's normally aspirated. It's normally aspirated, and it's 125 horsepower. It's not. It's not a particularly heavy vehicle because there's no front wheel or no all wheel drive available. They kept
they kept it, fairly lightweight they skipped, things like a lot of padded surfaces inside, which actually adds a surprising amount of weights to it. So it's all hard plastics, but it's nicely textured. It looks decent. It's not, when you touch it, it's not going to feel luxurious, but that's all right. It seems really solidly built. It's got a twist beam rear axle, drum brakes on the rear instead of discs, to save cost.
With any of this, this all sounds like entry-level hatchback stuff. Yeah,
and as entry-level hatchbacks go, it's quite well executed. Starting price is like 19.5. The one I had was about 21,000 with delivery charge. I think maxed out it's under $23,000. For a maxed out Kicks. With every available option. Yeah. So, if you're a first time new car buyer, and you want something like this and you can't afford, $30,000, $35,000, $40,000 like a lot of the other new cars that we drive, the Cherokee that I was driving a couple of weeks ago before the Wrangler, that was a $40,000 vehicle. The Wrangler was a $50,000 vehicle. A lot of people can't afford that, and the Kicks is a very reasonable alternative that's, gets decent fuel economy. I got 33 miles per gallon with it. It's not super fast, but it's quick and, it's got enough performance. It's not going to, you're going to be able to easily merge onto the highway and things like that. It's not a sporty utility vehicle, but it does fine. The ride is reasonably comfortable. It doesn't have a whole lot of steering feel, but, most people don't care about that anyway. So, it's going to be practical and should be fairly reliable. It does have, the same touchscreen infotainment system that's in the new Leaf, with support for CarPlay and Android Auto. It's not a great display as I noticed in the Leaf, but it's fine. It does have a blind spot monitor and backup camera, which is nice. There's no ACC or lane keeping system, but the blind spot monitor is always a handy feature to have. And it's good.
Yeah, and it should be. I think they've done the important work is making it visually appealing. Because the buyers that are, I think they're trying to find a generation of buyers that is just sort of now coming online, right? There's the generation that has had their future mortgaged multiple times and been saddled with crushing college debt. Now they need cars and they can sort of afford them. But yeah, it looks good. And that's half the battle right there in sort of any segment, but especially in the less expensive niches. I think it's really important, the aesthetics of the cars, just because nobody wants an ugly, cheap car, right? It says, I couldn't do any better or just something like that, So I think it looks good. It sounds to me like it's sort of same as it ever was for that, entry level, this would have been I'm trying to think, like a Sentra, right?
Yeah, and frankly, I would take this over a Sentra any day.
Right,
and it's better looking, it's more practical.
Yeah, and honestly, all of the things that people care about it's probably going to do pretty well, right? It's pretty comfortable, I'm assuming, and it's got decent cargo space, even though it's small, because it's essentially a hatchback. And so I'm sure it drives well because it's probably not that heavy and, relatively solid given the crash tests these days. Nothing really goes down the road that feels very floppy anymore. So, yeah, overall, I'm assuming it's pretty good to drive.
Yeah. On my favorite bouncy stretch of 94, it was actually a little bouncier than the Wrangler was. The Wrangler had actually better ride quality, but it was not objectionable by any stretch of the imagination. I think most people would be just would be perfectly satisfied with it. And like I said, as an entry level vehicle, and I actually just double checked the price, and the starting price for the S trim level is actually only $18,000. The mid-level SV that I was driving starts at 19, and the SR starts at 21.
Right, and the SR is sort of like the sporty-ish one, right? Like that's
sporty-ish or looking, yeah. I mean, right. They're all mechanically the same. There's only the one powertrain option.
Right.
But and in the SR you can get the Primatex upholstery on the seats, which is, I believe, some sort of polymer type of pseudo leatherette type of material.
That really sells it. Yeah, okay, all right. I mean, I hope I get that one soon.
It was surprisingly good. The only thing that still seemed a little off is, for some reason, they insist on using a flat bottom steering wheel, which it really doesn't need.
I don't like flat bottom steering wheels.
I have no issue with flat bottom steering wheels in low slung sports cars where you need every little bit of clearance you can get. Sometimes to get your legs underneath the steering wheel, but in anything like this, it makes no sense. It just looks silly.
Yeah, but fashion.
Yeah,
fashion has always looked silly to someone. So. All right, well, let's hit some topics, because there have been a couple of things that have captured the attention of the internet car echo chamber. The first one that I think I've seen a lot of hot takes about is the Mercedes EQC, or EQC. I don't know we'll have to play with how they say it.
Well, there's no space in there, so EQC I think is fine. Okay. Just like GLC or GLE or any of the other utilities. So yeah, this is the first of Mercedes' new line of battery electric vehicles. It's the first of their dedicated battery electric vehicle designs. That's they've in the past they've done a couple of conversion vehicles based on the Smart and also the B class, but this is the first one designed from the ground up as a BEV, and it's a SUV crossover, roughly the same size as the GLC, hence the C classification in there. So it's a compact crossover or utility vehicle. It's same wheelbase. Overall length is about 4 inches longer than the GLC. Like other modern BEVs, it has the battery pack, low under the floor. It's a dual. The one they showed off on Monday or Tuesday this week is the EQC 400 version. So it's a dual motor design, an electric motor at each axle, 400 horsepower. 80 kilowatt hour battery. Most of the stuff is about where you'd expect it to be in a premium battery electric utility vehicle right now. One thing that was a bit controversial about this was the range estimates that they gave, which was a little bit off. In the initial press release and the announcement they talked about 450 kilometer range, which is about just over 300 miles on the NEDC drive cycle, which is until this year, that's the test cycle that they've used in Europe. It's the new European driving cycle, which is now actually about 20 years old. And it's a notoriously optimistic drive cycle. So, it's the numbers that you get off the NEDC cycle are you're going to get far longer range than you'll ever get in the real world, or for non-electric vehicles, the fuel economy you get off that cycle tends to be much higher than what you'll ever experience in the real world. And right now in Europe, they're in the process of switching over to what's known as the WLTP, the World Harmonized Light Duty Test Protocol, which is a much more realistic test procedure, which will give you results that are closer to what you get on the EPA test results here in the U.S. And that's causing some grief for a bunch of European car makers right now. But we'll talk about that another time. But on the NEDC, it gets about, like I said, about 300 miles of range, and on the U.S. version of the press release, and at the event that they held in, I forget where it was. Was it in Stockholm? I think it was in Stockholm.
Somewhere.
Yeah. They talked about a range in the U.S. of about 200 miles. In fact, the U.S. version of the press release on the U.S. Mercedes media site said up to 200-mile range, which for a vehicle with an 80 kilowatt-hour battery is actually pretty disappointing.
Right. So that was what I tried to wrap my head around was, okay, an 80 kilowatt battery, like that's an early Tesla Model S, right? Like that's.
Yeah, well, even the Model S, the only Model S that had that shorter range, only had about a 60 kilowatt hour battery. That right. was the original one. And that's not even available anymore. So with an 80 kilowatt hour battery, it gets close to 300 miles in the U.S.
Right.
And even the new Hyundai Kona EV, which is going on sale in about a month or so, that's already got its EPA rating. It only has a 64 kilowatt hour battery, and it's rated at 258 miles.
Yeah, well, so part of it too, though, right, is like, because we were talking about this, was the EQC is heavy, and while weight, doesn't tend to be a huge factor for EVs, it's still a factor. Like, they're going to be heavy, but this seems like very heavy. It's 5,000 something pounds.
Yeah, it's almost 5,400 pounds. Which for a vehicle this size, that's a lot. That's about the same. That's just it's within about 80 pounds, I think, of a Model X, which is quite a bit larger vehicle. So, subsequently after the initial announcement, Mercedes did say, yeah, those numbers are wrong. It's going to be better. It's definitely going to be more than 200 miles in the U.S. It'll probably be, my guess is it'll probably be somewhere in the 240 mile range, 230 to 240, which is close to what the Jag I-Pace does.
Does that seem like, though, not to get like real conspiracy theorist, but does it seem like they didn't actually make a mistake, and they were saying, they were being conservative, and then when they got all kinds of blowback, they said, we need to do something. Like, let's just say we actually put out the wrong numbers and adjust this upward. Like, what can we reasonably stand behind? Yeah,
well, it's typical, when you're still quite a ways out from, an on sale date, when the final calibrations aren't done, to go out with a, at least for most manufacturers, to go out with a relatively conservative number. I think in this case, they kind of overdid it. I think they went too conservative.
They also put out a 52-page press release. So
that is true. But that's pretty standard for Mercedes-Benz and BMW and Audi. These press books. I've gone through them many times over the years, and they do tend to run on a little bit. The thing is, the EQC is not going on sale in Europe until next summer. So they've still got plenty of time to do more work on this thing, and it's not coming to the U.S. until 2020. So it's going to be built in the Bremen plant in Germany, where they also build the GLC. And this is one of the things that's interesting about Mercedes' approach to this that's a little different from what, for example, Audi is doing and Volkswagen. And that Mercedes said that rather than having dedicated assembly lines for their electric vehicles, they're going to integrate them in with the conventional vehicles that are in the same size class. So the EQC will be built on the same assembly line with the GLC, the upcoming EQS that we'll see next year sometime, which is a full size electric SUV, about the same size as the GLS, is going to be built in Alabama on the same assembly line with the GLS, and so on with the rest of their EQ lineup. And that way they hope to have the flexibility to be able to shift production as demand warrants. So rather than dedicating production capacity to one platform, to one powertrain or the other, they can just easily switch back and forth as needed depending on how much consumer demand there is.
I mean, I think that's approaching it like the smart mass production automaker would do it. Like that's smart, like you're not setting up a dedicated line that's only going to lose money. You're not putting a tent in your parking lot. You're
well, for what it's worth, Tesla doesn't really have that option because they don't build internal combustion vehicles. They only build EVs. No. So
I get it.
Anything they do is going to be dedicated to EVs.
I get it, but they also build 3 different platforms that apparently don't really share much.
That is true. But Audi, for example, they have dedicated their Bremen plant to doing EVs, and they actually started production this week, this past Monday, on the e-tron Quattro, which we'll be seeing here in San Francisco in about a week and a half. I'll be out in San Francisco for the worldwide debut of that vehicle, and hopefully have a chance to talk to some of the engineers and designers on that program. But
are we seeing I feel like we're starting to see this critical mass of established, old line. I don't want to call them old, but long experienced automakers really turning up the heat on their EV products, and so it's going to be really stiff competition, especially Mercedes and Audi, because they sort of swim in the same water as the upstarts like Tesla. So it's just gotten very much more competitive over the last 6 months even.
Yeah, I mean, we had the Jag I-Pace launched in Europe this summer and going on sale here in the U.S. In the next month or two. The e-tron started production this week, and it's going to be followed by several more battery electric models from Audi. Porsche is going to be launching the Taycan early next year, and then the Cross Turismo version of that they showed as a concept Geneva this year will be following that. Mercedes is going to have a whole lineup of these EQ models, basically equivalent to all of their internal combustion vehicles. So most of these companies are planning to have anywhere from 25 to 50% of their production being plug-in vehicles by the mid-2020s, which is a dramatic shift, in a fairly short period of time. Now, whether or not they can sell all those vehicles as plug-ins is an entirely different story. But they're planning to be ready to build that many if there's demand for them. Yeah.
Well, and maybe there is a certain point in the market where you generate demand by creating product.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And so, they're at that point. Like, they haven't oversaturated the demand yet. They'll get there, and some other automakers who've been at it longer are already there. So this is going to be like, these are new things now, and this is new stuff to check out, and more options. I think they're only going to make the EV market grow, at least in the short term. So it's interesting to watch. Is there anything that stood out about the EQC? I mean, besides the sort of the disappointing range to you?
No, I mean, the rest of it was, largely expected. The design was pretty close to the concept that we saw a couple of years ago, and it's clearly an evolution.
Venza.
Yeah, I mean, it's it's an evolution of where Mercedes is today. It's a little cleaner and sleeker than the current Mercedes lineup, and that's at the reveal event, Dieter Zetsche, the CEO, indicated that's going to be the design language for the EQ models going forward. In the interior, again, it's an evolution of where they are. It incorporates the new MBUX infotainment system that they launched on the A-Class a few months ago, which is that is powered by Nuance's drag and drive system. So it's got a virtual voice assistant built into there, and some AI capabilities to automatically put the features that you use most, bring those forward, and make those most visible to you in the interface. And the voice recognition system that's built into that is a hybrid system that combines both embedded components in the vehicle, but also using the cloud for some of the voice recognition. So when you've got connectivity, it'll go to the cloud, much like the Amazon Alexa or Google Voice or Siri will do. Where you've got more capability to both interpret the words and also do semantic understanding of what you're saying. So you can do more natural language type voice recognition rather than having to remember specific syntaxes for the things you want to do with voice commands. And I've tried the system out with Nuance a couple of times over the last couple of years on prototypes, and it works really well. It's much more capable than any of the current built-in voice recognition systems that are in cars today. And actually, BMW just announced a similar system today that they're launching next year. And I don't know for sure, but I'm guessing that it's probably based on the same Nuance drag and drive technology. Because it's got pretty similar capabilities that Nuance has been working on for a few years now.
I mean, Nuance, they're a local team here, and they are not messing around. They've been at voice recognition stuff for a very long time. And I think that the natural language capabilities of these systems is going to be key to making them better, or making them more
usable.
Adopted. Yeah, because the thing for me always about all the voice recognition is, I don't like to talk to machines. But if you can make it where you don't have to memorize a set of commands, you've reduced the barrier, right? You've reduced friction. Where now all I have to do is get comfortable on my own sort of personal level with saying like, hey, BMW, or, hey, MBUX, do this thing, and once you get comfortable with that, and it will be novel, where you can just sort of have a little snippet of conversation with it, and it will understand and do it, versus like the voice recognition in older systems where it doesn't hear the right command, and it asks you to repeat it, and you're screaming at it.
And you have to do, like 20 steps to enter, a destination that you want to go to. You got to say, go to navigation, points of interest, in whatever city, and then the place you want to go to. Whereas, with a system like this, just as I've been able to do with Android Auto for the last couple of years, I can just say, navigate to Detroit Metro Airport. And it knows where to go.
Right. But I think that sort of being tied to the cloud is the key for that, right? Because if your phone doesn't have
absolutely.
connectivity, it doesn't work, right?
Right. Well, that's why it's a hybrid system where there's also a subset of that capability that's built into the car, so that even that subset is much more capable than what they have today because they've got more powerful processing. One of the things, the Mercedes system is actually running on an NVIDIA Parker processor, which that's actually the same processor that they used in the first version of the NVIDIA Drive PX platform for automated vehicles. So it's built, it's a combination of an ARM CPU and an NVIDIA GPU on a single chip. Now the newer generations of Drive PX use newer generations of those chips that are much more powerful. But even compared to what you would have typically found in a car, even 3 or 4 years ago. The Parker is way more powerful and can do a lot of even natural language, or near natural language voice recognition right in the car without even having to go to the cloud. I mean, when you go to the cloud, it has, it's even more reliable, but you can still do a lot of stuff right in the vehicle.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it stands to reason. The first voice recognition systems we all got to sort of try out was like 10 or even 15 years ago now. Maybe not quite 15, but,
pretty close to that when the first BMW iDrive came out.
Yeah, that's true. So, yeah, I mean, it's getting there. So that'll be interesting. I like how Mercedes has sort of watched other EV automakers do their thing, and they've got their own wall box, just like a Tesla, charger and stuff. Like they're doing a lot of the standard playbook stuff. So we'll see how well that takes off. But I mean, a line of electric Mercedes, there could be worse things.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and like I said, we'll be seeing the same sort of thing from pretty much every manufacturer, within the next year, or a couple of years, and just this week, GM reiterated its plans for 20 new zero emission vehicles by 2023, and they announced that. LG Electronics they've got a new plant running now in Michigan, producing battery packs for the Bolt. Up until now, Bolt battery packs have been coming from South Korea, and now they're assembling those battery packs in Michigan, closer to the assembly plant in Orion, Michigan, where they build the Bolt. So they'll have a lot more capacity starting this fall to build more of those vehicles and sell more of those and get them into other models as well. So they're going to have several new models debuting in the next year, electric vehicles debuting in the next year. Good. I like EVs. They're fun. Oh, one last thing that I just saw on Twitter today about the EQC that I thought was really interesting was because it doesn't have Falcon doors like the Model X, it can carry a roof box, and apparently Norway. Now, who would want one of those on an SUV?
Well, I mean, a family buyer, right? And Norway is the largest EV market in the world, I think, or in Europe at least.
In Europe, yeah,
probably in Europe, because
they have the highest penetration of EVs of any country in the world. Overall, it's obviously a much smaller market than the U.S. or other countries. But
so one of the things that Europeans do is they smartly go on holiday for like the entire freaking summer, and when they do that, they haul caravans and put roof boxes on their vehicles. So the EQC can do that,
right?
The Model X can't. So. I thought that was fascinating. I was like, I wouldn't even think of that, but cultural context is really that's a big thing.
No, absolutely.
All right, what else we got?
So the Ford Focus Active, it's not coming to America.
This makes me sad.
Yeah.
Sad-ish. I mean, Ford's not trying to sell any cars at all anymore. Nothing.
No, well, they were going to bring the Focus Active. They dropped plans to build a new generation Focus in North America. Originally, the last Focus was built in Michigan, and they were originally going to shift that production to a new plant in Mexico so that they could use the Michigan plant to build the Ranger and Bronco. And that's still happening. The Ranger and Bronco are going into the Ranger's going into production within the next month or so in Wayne, and the Bronco will be coming on next year. They were going to build an all-new plant in Mexico, but as sales of cars declined, they decided, okay, we don't actually need that capacity of another assembly plant. So they were going to build them in Hermosillo alongside the Fusion. And as sales continued to decline, they realized, we don't need to do that either. So we're just not going to build them in North America at all. And they were going to bring them in from China. And then they decided
not anymore.
The the only model they were going to bring from China was the Focus Active, which is a sort of pseudo crossover. Put some black, matte black wheel arches on there. Jack it up about half an inch, make it look sort of more like a crossover. Kind of like a Subaru type of thing. But with the 25% import tariff on vehicles from China, that plan has been canceled, and so we won't be getting any Focus variants in North America for the foreseeable future. Yeah, I mean, we will see that hardware. As the Focus is the Escape, right? Like that's. Yeah, so that's that's Ford's new generation transverse, front wheel drive unibody platform, and so that will be underpinning the new Escape that's coming next year, as well as other new vehicles that we can't talk about yet, So it will be coming here in a different form that is more SUV like than the Focus Active. Yeah. So Ford, honestly, it's kind of a shocking move just because style and not even style, but just consumer demand has shifted. I think from managing your car company so that it doesn't run into the ground, it's very smart. It's saying, what, people aren't buying those, so we're just not going to make them. I mean, from a purely business standpoint, they're doing the right things. They're doing what they need to do, rather than hanging on until they run it into the ground. They're just saying, okay, fine. It's at the point where it doesn't make sense financially to do this anymore, so we're not going to, and we'll focus on the products that customers want, which is various kinds of higher riding utility vehicles. And so we're going to get a whole slew of those over the next 18 months, from the the Bronco and the Escape and various other ones that will be forthcoming in the next year, as well as this new battery electric crossover that they just released the first teaser image of in a story that Joanne Muller did about. That was the Mustang inspired one, right? Yeah, that's the one that they kind of teased at the Detroit Auto Show this year. They did a teaser video, that ended with the name Mach 1. I think they were, kind of seeing how people would react to that name. And as soon as people realized that it was for an electric crossover, even though it's, going to be a high performance electric crossover, they got so much negative feedback on that one that they have apparently dropped that plan and will come up with a different name for it. They have a lot of other names. They have a lot of other names. They could even call it Lynx. Yeah, or Maverick. Yeah, Maverick. Yeah, there you go. Actually, that name they did. I think they did recently re-register that trademark, but I don't think they're going to use Maverick on the EV. I think that's actually going to be on one of the other utilities that they're doing. They've got two different off-road utilities coming. One is the Bronco, and the other is based on the front-wheel drive platform, the transverse platform, and that one I'm guessing may well end up being the Maverick. Huh. Interesting. Yeah, I mean, so what do you, this kind of shift in production? Moving on from Ford, do you think that we're going to see very soon no more Buick Envision in the market? That's the other one that's built in China right now. I wouldn't be surprised if the Envision goes away, because that is imported from China, as is the Cadillac CT6 plug-in hybrid. The CT6, since it's already built here, they could add production of that at the Detroit Hamtramck plant where they build the CT6, build those there. But there's no, the Envision is not built anywhere in North America or anywhere outside of China. But it is based on, the same platform as the Equinox and the Terrain. So they could add that, or perhaps the next generation of the Envision, could be added to the same production lines where they build the Equinox and Terrain. Huh.
Where's the Volvo XC40 built? Is that built in Sweden or Norway or?
That one I think it's built in Belgium.
Belgium, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that one's not quite, because they had been. I think there had been like scuttlebutt or like rumors that they were going to move some Volvo production to China, which again, like,
yeah, well they are
fine.
they are doing they are doing Volvo production in China, and I think they were going to bring some S90s from China.
Yeah.
But my guess is they'll probably end up building those in South Carolina now.
Yeah, well, and they just launched the S60 in South Carolina, so that's interesting. Volvo finally has a U.S. plant after, toying with that idea multiple times over the last 70 years. It's too bad that we're not going to get the Focus Active, because I was enthused that it would be charming in that Focus way.
Yeah, well, and the reviews out of Europe on the new Focus are all extremely positive. Everybody really likes it. So it's a shame that we won't get a chance to try it out here.
Well, we'll get the Escape, and it'll be similar.
It'll be similar enough for most Americans.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think unless you've got anything else, I think we've done a podcast.
Yeah, we've gone over an hour. That's good enough for this week. We've got other stuff we can talk about next week.
Yeah,
And
there was a really interesting article, but I wanted to dig into it more, just about sort of sustainable disruption or sustainable innovation. Basically, the idea was the pioneers get the arrows and the settlers get the land, so you got to learn how to settle.
Right. Yeah. So we'll talk about that one next week. And on Monday, I will be out in Seattle driving the new Cadillac XT4.
That's going to be really interesting. That's good.
Yeah.
A vehicle that Cadillac really needs.
Yep. And then Tuesday, I will be hosting a webinar, which I'll put a link to the registration on the show notes, which is going to be a really interesting discussion on data and how it's used in developing autonomous vehicles. And we're going to have the CEO of Mighty AI, Darren Nakuda, along with Danny Shapiro from NVIDIA, and Ryan Eustace from Toyota Research Institute. He's the senior VP of autonomous vehicles at TRI, and we'll be doing a roundtable discussion on this, which you might want to tune into. It should be a fascinating conversation.
Is that a Navigant roundtable?
That is a Navigant research webinar, yeah. And there's also a white paper that was just published that I authored on that same topic. And I'll include links to where you can get that and listen to the webinar if you're so interested.
All right. So until next time, thanks everyone, and we'll see you next time. I probably won't be driving for the next podcast.
All right. See you next time.
Owning a boat comes with a number of perks, like being able to fling your favorite fishing rod around. And here's another perk. Geico's boat insurance covers your boat and your belongings. And with specialist support from agents that are as passionate about boating as you are, there's so much value that you'll want to high-five someone. But not while you're holding your fishing rod. That's a prized possession. So hold on tight with both hands and keep it covered through boat insurance. Get more with Geico.